Today, Watchgate, it's time for you to have your say. Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Welcome to this post covering finance and property news with a distinctively Australian flavour. Today I'm joined again by Robbie Barwick from the Citizens Party with an update on Aussie Post. Hi Robbie.
Hi Martin.
Very interesting times, huh?
Yes. So let's bask in a little bit of glory for a second. We achieved a Senate inquiry into the Australia Post Christine Holgate saga. But now the real work begins because the public need to get involved in that inquiry. And that's what we want to talk about. We've had a lot of experience with this now, Martin.
Oh, yes.
So we know the effect it can have, but I think there's a qualitative difference in this inquiry from previous ones that you and I have encouraged people to participate in. This is something that, Parliament, this is a proper investigation. Right? This is not inquiry into legislation. And the public here can actually speak to it. So when you and I talked last week, I foreshadowed we'd give people an update on this, if it was appropriate, and it definitely is appropriate for the people to participate. So we want to encourage everyone to make submissions. It can make a difference.
Right. And so it's the typical process, right, where effectively they announce the inquiry, invite submissions. What's the timeline on it?
Okay, so here's what I want people to think about. The submissions close on the 19th of March. The inquiry is concluded on the 30th of April. But ignore the 30th of April. The key date is the 19th of March. That's the part that every viewer who wants to participate, and I encourage you all to participate, needs to have at the back of their mind. And the best way to think of the 19th of March is get to making a submission straight away, and you won't have to worry about that deadline. Don't try and do it at the last moment. And I'll try and follow my own advice on that as well. Right? Not try and do it at the last moment. No, but this is very important. Now I want to foreshadow a few other things that will happen in this inquiry. There will be public hearings. Right? This is a proper inquiry. And so it's important for people to understand the role the public can play here. So what we'll do is provide the link to the inquiry website. And the website has the terms of reference for the inquiry that I read out in our last show. So I won't read them out again. It also has the instructions for making a submission. The submissions do need to be relevant to the terms of reference. So just have a look at those terms of reference. However, point H in the terms of reference is basically saying anything else, any other related matters, right? And that's where the public can actually have a say on that part. So the people at Australia Post, I presume Christine Holgate, the licensed post offices especially, the trade unions that are involved, all the direct stakeholders in Australia Post will make their own submissions specific to those terms of reference, right? The ones that are there about the actual way Holgate was removed. They'll all have to make submissions on that. So the public, that's not really relevant for the public. But the public can do this. The public can speak to why you even got interested in this issue in the first place. Those who followed it, those who've made the phone call, etc. Think about that. Why am I interested? Why have I responded? Why have I got involved? Because that's what you should express in a submission, the specifics of that. Please don't copy and paste from things like Citizens Party media releases on your submissions, right? Think about it. Make them thoughtful in your own words. They don't have to be very long. The key here is going to be volume. But tell the committee why you think this is an outrage. And of course, why you think it is probably going to be very similar to why a lot of other people think it, but that's okay. Just express that in your own words. There's two things I'd like people to think about in this regard. People can look at our press release on this called "You Are the Public. Tell the Senate inquiry your expectations." And I play this a deliberate play on words because those two words, public expectations, are what was used to crucify Christine Holgate for buying Cartier watches. The government couldn't point to any crime, any rule, or anything like that. It wasn't consistent with public expectations. And of course, they call that the pub test, right? Well, that's only because you lied about it. That's why it wasn't consistent, because once the full story came out, of course it was damn consistent. As the licensed post office has said, those people deserve 10 times what they got for what they did to save this institution and save the licensed post offices from certain bankruptcy, right? So that part you can talk about. So they said public expectation is you shouldn't spend money on gold watches or Cartier watches. Well, isn't the public expectation really that Australia Post is our asset and we want it run properly so that service can be maintained instead of being downsized and sold off to the highest bidder? Because that's what Christine Holgate did, right? And if you value Australia Post as a public asset that provides a service, not just to densely populated big cities, but to all across Australia, speak to that, right? And that's the testimony of what the way the licensed post office has put it. I don't know if you know this, but there's only been 3 executives of Australia Post since 1990 when it was corporatised. Of those 3, she was the best, because even before the notorious Ahmed Fahor, the previous guy was also selling off real estate. There was lots and lots of real estate to sell off. They were making profits through self-cannibalizing the business, right? And she turned it around and made profits through growing the business. And that organic sustainable growth, the intention was, well, the services are important. We need to fund them. There's ways we can grow the business. And she grew the business, especially through banking services, right, which worked beautifully. So that deserves applaud, not attack, right? In fact, the latest breaking news, Martin, is that Australia Post's half-year profit up until December 30 was a bumper, $160 million. And that came from the hard work that she did to lay a foundation for that. Now, that was sort of like the windfall of people sending a lot of parcels in the pandemic lockdown recession era, like 2020, right? So it is a windfall profit. However, previous windfall profits for Australia Post only came through sales of property, right? This was the business working as it's supposed to work, made the profit. And that's why it was a bumper profit that she laid the foundation for. Terry McCrann has a really good article about that in the Australian, because he attacks the Australia Post Board for downplaying its own profit. And the only reason it would downplay its own profit is because of the politics surrounding this, because to trumpet the profit like it would normally do, it'd have to give credit to Christine Holgate. All right, and you know, the current management of Australia Post is too intimidated by the government to want to do that. So anyway, that's my question to you, the viewer. Isn't your expectation as Joe Public or Josephine Public that you want Australia Post run properly so it can maintain those services? Well, that's what we have to tell the government is the real public expectation here. And that's why you get to have a say. Make that point and make it forcefully. The other thing that the public can speak to, Martin, is actually the very how important the services that Australia Post offices provide to communities. They are the lifeblood of communities. And if you know what I'm talking about, I'm sure most people do, speak to that, right? There's a little clip actually we could probably insert here, Martin. It's really fascinating. There's a show on the ABC, Heather Hewitt, goes around called Back Roads, and she goes to Windorah in Queensland, which is the next town down from Birdsville, but that's like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kilometres from Birdsville, right, outback Queensland. And the locals there have this quirky little innovation called yabby races. And what do they use it for? They use it to raise money to sustain local services, including the local post office, because the local post office is the lifeblood for mail, banking, and a whole bunch of other services provided to the town.
So many of these far-flung places are in a race to survive after losing people and services to bigger towns and cities.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I tell you what, every man...
So they've got to get creative to stay on the map.
Bring it on, bring it on!
In the little Queensland town of Windorah, the locals came up with one quirky idea.
This is the top of the drop, the best of the best, out of the Cuba, the Melbourne Cup of all yabbies.
It feels all right.
Oh, few in there?
Brian Days is the yabby catcher.
Okay.
How much would you pay for that?
I don't know. $5?
You won't get a look in. First bid will go for 200 and he'll probably sell for about 500.
$500?
Yep.
The yabby races raise money for the flying doctors and local projects. When the town was about to lose its post office, it was yabby money that helped buy a whole new building.
What would it have meant for Windorah to have no post office?
I think the town would die. The post office is really a hub of the town. It's their mail in, their mail out, their banking facilities, their just everything.
It's about time you went to Birdsville. It's about time you went out back.
This time, the yabby races raised $17,000. Proving a little bit of ingenuity goes a long way in a small town's fight for survival.
Stop over in Windorah and buy a yabby. It's about time. It's about time.
And what happens when a town loses its bank, its last bank branch and its last ATM? If there's no post office at which the people the public can bank and do all those other things, everyone has to go to the next town. What that does is the milk bars, the bakeries, the convenience stores in the town, they lose their customers because they've all had to hightail it to the next town. They don't come to town anymore to do their business. They've got to go to the next town, and the town withers and dies. But the local post office keeps it alive, right? And this is the story of regional Australia, and it's incredibly valuable. Before Christine Holgate got there, the management of Australia Post was not committed to that network of post offices at all. They were letting them go off the bankruptcy cliff, right? I mean, it's really, really tragic. She turned that around. She saw the value in those services, not just as a bottom line for Australia Post, as a services for the Australian community. And she made sure that was prioritised. And this is the person who was crucified over rewarding executives for the biggest deal in Australian Post history with $20,000 in watches, right? That's the stuff the public can have a say in, and you can make it clear in your submission to the government, just in no uncertain terms, that behaviour is unacceptable. You do not treat that person that way. She deserves applaud, not to be attacked in the unconscionable way she was. And if enough people deliver that message to this committee in the form of submissions, what it does, it has the effect of, shaping the perception around the whole thing. They then know they're on notice that they better do their job as committee members really seriously and get to the bottom of this scandal properly, bring it all out in the open so that this can be rectified, right? And they'll know that everyone's watching. The more submissions we send in, the more they have a sense of, hang on, everyone's watching this. We're not going to be able to do some little fiddle here under the radar, which sometimes, that happens in Parliament all the time. No, everyone's watching. So, mate, that's the power of the submissions that you, as the public, have in your hands right now.
Yeah, and Robbie, I just want to underscore this community aspect, right? I'm in regional New South Wales, and I know how important that local community service is, right? A lot of stuff happens in and around the post office. And, as more and more banks are withdrawing branches, and we've seen it locally here with less and less branches available, the post office becomes ever more important. To say nothing of the fact that you also, of course, still get the mail delivered and those sorts of things. Those are really critical services that are part of Australia's fabric and part of local communities. And to my mind, submissions that relate to more than just the watches. I mean, the watches is an important sort of bellwether issue, right? Because, of course, it was being used as an excuse by the government to do something completely destructive towards Australia Post deliberately to support the banks. But the critical issue here is this is about the DNA of Australia, and this is about the way that local communities work and operate. And Australia Post has a unique footprint and a unique potential to do a whole lot more for the future and preserve local identity, local community and local services. And I think that that's probably the tenor of the sort of submissions that will actually really help to underscore why this is really important. We are not prepared just to let yet another public service just die on the vine and get gobbled up by commercial operations who then get privatised. And meantime, of course, the banks close the local branches and do more and more digital and just say, I'll just go digital. And, a lot of people can't do that. This is a really critical identity issue for Australia, it seems to me.
Oh, it is. And as you know, I got to go to Parliament 2 weeks ago with Angela Cramp, who's the Executive Director of the Licensed Post Office Group. We had lots and lots of meetings with members of Parliament. They're all sympathetic in their own way, but there was still a proportion of them that were not ignorant. They were naive about where the world's going because they know where the world's going technology-wise, but they never turn around and say, who are we leaving behind? And the people they leave behind queue up at post offices. And the queues are long. Go to your local town shopping strip. If you've got a Banks in your shopping strip, go to them. There's no queues. You're met by a concierge. What can we do for you? Here, have a mortgage, have two, have 100, right? Go to the post office. There's always a queue. Little old ladies, right? Angela was telling me sometimes I have to show them what end of the key card to stick in the ATM. And it's the post office person who goes out from behind the counter to do that, to step them through that at that level of care, because they are a community service, right? And so they do their job for us. Now's the time for us to fight for them. So please, the calls that you, the viewer of this show, made were very important in getting this inquiry up. Now it's just as important that you get your pen and paper out and make a submission, right? Prioritise doing it. And here's what I suggest, Martin. We do it in two ways. So that get on the website, like I said, we'll provide the link below. Look at the terms of reference, write your submission. If you can, type it up as an email or as a Word file or whatever, and follow the instructions on the website how to email or upload it. Do that. That's just to make sure you get it in time. But in your submission, actually tell them that you're going to send them a hard copy for their records. And let's everybody go and buy your $1.10 stamp, stick it on, print out your submission, stick it in an envelope, put the stamp on it, and mail it in, right? Because I tell you what, it's the sort of thing politicians know. We want that mailroom in Canberra to be chockers, the Parliament House mailroom to be chockers of people. And right on the outside of the envelope, along with the address of the committee, put somewhere on this envelope, right, reinstate Holgate, right? Let everyone in the Australia Post who's handling this know, this is part of that campaign, right? Let's flood let's have a river of or multiple rivers of postal Australia Post carried letters going into Parliament House saying we want this fixed, because that will. So what we're doing, let me just reiterate, it's putting them on notice. The public's watching, but it's also changing the political perception. Because when this was first done, I can tell you, when I first started making inquiries, that first week, because I'd seen Scott Morrison go off his head, and I thought, well, I know you're the single most untrustworthy person in the history of the human race, so there's no way I'm going to take your carrying on seriously, right? I'm going to find out why is this jerk carrying on over $20,000 in watches, and I start making phone calls, and everyone was telling me, no, you can't, you can't, that's a bad look. You can't buy watches. No, that's a bad look. And my first question I said to them was, do you know they did it? Do you know it was done in 2018, not this year? Oh, no, I didn't know that. Right? And then you start digging more and you find out all these other facts and start putting them out. That perception, that political perception of a bad look, oh, no, you do that in politics, you're done for, etc. It's understandable that she's been shunted aside. That was the political perception. That's now changed, right? That's what we've done in this campaign. We've now forced them to get that crap out of your head. The public is not buying that part of it. You had that nicely packaged up for them back in October, and now they've seen through that. They know there's something bigger afoot. Listen to what they're saying on this, and that's that part of it. These letters will remind those senators on the committee that the political perception has changed, and therefore they've got to do their jobs because it's in their power to open this thing wide up. And we'll do other shows soon, Martin, as we've discussed, on the other parts of the agenda. There's lots to be said about the privatisation agenda we haven't talked about in detail yet. A lot of that will come out of this inquiry. We want to do it soon so that we help pressure that. But the submissions that you make the difference. So please don't watch this and think, oh, that's good, but I won't prioritise doing this. No. If you make calls, please make a submission. Really, really crucial. Let's get thousands in there because it makes a difference.
And I think it's showing we care, right? And we care for the right reasons. And we've had enough of the shenanigans from Parliament and parliamentarians. I mean, look all the other things that are going on at the moment, right? This is an opportunity to really get some policy shaping done for the future of Australia and Australians. And I will just say, Robbie, that my experience of making submissions, it's best not just to send an email. It's best to actually write a submission and attach it to an email, right? Either as a PDF or a Word document, because what you want to try and avoid is their ability to simply say, oh, it's communication, right? So essentially make the submission as a standalone. It doesn't have to be long, but as a separate document attached to an email, and as you say, send it in too, then you've got a much better chance of them being, recognising it.
Absolutely. Do not just send an email. Put in a Word document, PDF, attach it to the email, or use the upload feature. It requires you to get a Parliament account. That's okay, because you can bet your bottom dollar that Martin North and Robbie Barwick will be asking you to do another submission sometime in the near future, and you can keep that account handy.
And I'll be making my own submission soon as well on the broader issues, and using some of my own research in terms of the importance of community services and how valuable the whole Australia Post thing is, and the fact that banking services still need to be local. At the end of the day, that's what this is partly about as well.
And if you don't have on the technical side, if you don't have access to computers for whatever reason, that's just as good as well. Handwrite out your submission, stick it in an envelope, and get it there.
Absolutely.
But please prioritise that. So, this is Wednesday. Do it this week, right? Because then you don't have to worry about the 19th of March deadline. Do it this week. Let's front load this. If you put it in the mail, that'll give it play. Even with the notorious service about Australia Post, which is a separate issue, right? I know that's an issue, but it's a separate issue to what Christian Holgate was doing. It'll get there in time to deliver the message in Canberra.
Yeah, and one last plea: if you do make a submission, just put a little comment on the website to say that you've put a submission in, because one of the things that I really got from the last show that we did, Robbie, when we asked people to make phone calls, is the feedback loop we got when people said, I've made the phone call, and other people said, oh, I've made a phone call. So it's a mutually reinforcing process. So it's all part of using people power for the benefit of Australia and Australians.
Mutually reinforcing. It's inspiring. I mean, I'm at the front end of this. And I see those comments on the show that people have made to say, yes, I've made the calls. And your heart leaps, right? You know that, hey, this is working. So look, that feedback is incredible. And we can't tell the viewer everything we know, but we know that we weren't the only ones watching that and watching those submissions. That show where people were putting those comments saying, I've made those calls, that was viewed all around Australia at some very high levels, and it made a huge impact, right? So yes, do that. Report back on the comments that you've made the submission.
Absolutely. So, Robbie, thanks for your time today. So, folks, your mission, should you wish to accept it, for the next few days, make that submission. We'll be making more shows on this over the next 2 or 3 weeks, because this is an opportunity to put a real big stamp on the future of Australia and Australians, and Australia Post has a big role to play.
Yep. Thanks, Martin.
Thank you. See you soon.